Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the ninth session of the IAN Knowledge Series. In any startup journey, pricing your product and approaching your first few customers is quite an important phase. We've received a whole host of questions for this topic, and to help answer those questions, we're fortunate to have with us two incredible speakers, Mr. Arun Seth and Ravi Saraogi. So Mr. Arun is the advisory board member at IAN Fund. He is also a board member of Narayan Hospitals and Jubilant Foods. Earlier, he worked for British Telecom Group in India in a variety of positions, with the last 18 years as non-executive chairman. Starting as the MD in 1995, he built it to its current leadership position in managed telecom services. He has also been on the executive committee for NASSCOM for about 8 years, driving a number of programs like the BPO and Green. Ravi is the co-founder and president of APAC at Unifor. Unifor is a prominent player in the conversational service automation space, where they are combining the power of artificial intelligence, automation technology, and machine learning. Unifor is disrupting an outdated customer service model by bridging the gap between humans and machines and focusing on conversations. Ravi leads sales, delivery, and customer success for Unifor. He is known for his excellent analytical skills, dexterity in problem resolution, and proclivity for driving operational excellence. So thank you, Mr. Arun and Ravi, for taking time out of your busy schedules today. It's wonderful to have you with us on this call. Mr. Arun, to begin, for any startup, the first few customers are very, very critical. So it would be wonderful if you could shed some light on how should a founder decide, which are their first customers that they should target and get on board?
Thank you very much, Kanchi, and thank you for inviting me to this panel. But you're spot on. And my suggestion to founders is to figure out who these first few customers are likely to be even before building the product. Don't wait to build your product, then find out who you're building it for. You can't build this one and hope someone will buy. You might be lucky, but it's too much of a chance you're taking, especially in the B2B space that we're going to be focusing on today. And I would recommend very strongly, you should engage deeply with a few at a very early stage, then invest money and build the product. If you're aiming the product for, say, banks, then it's ideal you talk to somebody in the bank's team to understand what value they will get from your product, as your product must add value to the bank in what I consider a very simple format. And I've learned this over the years. It's very simply, it's got to be faster, cheaper, and better for their internal ops if you're going to be increasing some efficiency for them, or it's ideal if your product can add value or revenue. And at least two of these things should be there to my mind. And I hope that Ravi will talk later on that it's either faster, cheaper, or better. It's ideal if all three are there. As they say in Punjabi, balle balle if you get all three. The issue for founders is getting to the right people. The good news today is most large companies have evolved to having an innovation team that actively look for early stage startups. It was not so earlier. And this is really with the help of IAN, of TAI and NASSCOM, all these platforms that I've been part of. Companies have evolved, especially large companies have evolved to create these platforms by which they can actually look for interesting and innovative startups to help their operations. The other tried and tested way is to get an advisor from that sector, somebody senior who has deep relationships and can use the contacts and use his or her personal reputation to get you heard, especially when you don't have even customer number one. At this early stage, I tell founders that they must do this direct and get to know the actual problem and see if your solutions add some real value to the customer. Especially in B2B, the other interesting channel is using system integrators, especially if you're aiming for large customers, whether TCS, Wipro, Tech Mahindra, something I've been involved in. And they can really help you because they also are looking for innovative solutions to take you. But it's not necessary. But you must be, as a founder, must be right up front talking to these guys. So let me repeat, just one second. Hello?
Yes, Mr. Arun, we can hear you.
Can hear you?
Yes.
Yeah, there was some flickering here. No, my personal favorite, because I come from the telecom industry, it's use telcos to distribute B2B. And that's actually becoming, especially as you go towards the SaaS model, telcos will become extremely interesting distributors for you guys. And please be engaged with them, because the telcos, my industry is under threat, certainly in India, that the price of telecom, the communications is going to zero. So these guys need your money to work, to bring solutions to their customers to make some more money. But let me repeat, is the job of the founder and can't be delegated or abrogated at all. You must be convinced that you have a solution that will disrupt the status quo. You need that madness in you to leave a safe job. And Ravi, I'd love you to answer this or talk of this. When you leave a safe job and go out into the startup world, it's a given that you must have 2 or 3 options at that point, and you shouldn't be looking only at one type of customer. You should be having at least a bouquet of 3, to my mind, in case you have different challenges. uh, for example, if you don't have too many, if you have really a disruptive product, which could be what I'd call a patented technology, and you don't have any models, then even people like IAN will shun you. Sorry for that, Kanchi. So they all look for new models, or at least proven models, to be able to fund you. So you'll always have a problem there. You've got to go out there and get your number one customer. And that's the best thing to do.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Arun. And I think that's a good segue into asking Ravi, since he's founded Unifor. So it'll be good to hear from you. Like Mr. Arun said, what about your experience at Unifor? How did you manage your first few sales? And from your experience, given that you've been there, done that, what is your advice to founders?
So first of all, thank you, Kanchi, and thank you to the IN platform for inviting me. And it's an absolute pleasure to be in the same panel as an industry stalwart like Mr. Arun said. Good afternoon to everyone, and to some of the great points that Arun has mentioned. I'll just like to delve into some of the experiences that I have had. I come from an engineering background, and as engineers, right, we tend to believe that a product at all points in time has to be perfect. And once it is perfect, then we go to the market. But as you get into your own startup and as you look into building the business, there's always this catch of perfection versus speed. And in my opinion, in the initial days, no product can be perfect. So we need to sort of go to the industry and focus on speed to start with, right? And when you look at speed to start with, there is no one else in the organization who can better sell the product than the founder himself or herself. The way they understand not only about the product, but how it is built, what culture was behind building that product, eventually what benefits you want to drive with that product, not for yourself, but more importantly for your customer, and the belief that the founders have, no one else in that organization can have. And when we talk about the journey of 0 to 1, at the initial stage, and I have personally seen this fail many a times, and I come from the incubation program of IIT Madras. A lot of companies who started, who had segregated, had segue in midway, looked into different product categories, etc. One of the things that we have seen very early is that people who have delegated that initial task of sales to someone else invariably did not succeed. And the lesson from that experience, and personally, when at Unifor we started this, where 2 co-founders, Umesh and I, we both sort of ensured that not 0 to 1, but initial set of 5 to 7 customers were bought in by the founders. Leave aside the first year or second year or third year of the organization. Even after 20, 30, 40 years of your organization, founders always have to sell. They have to sell everything. They have to sell to the customer. They have to sell their story to people to bring in right talent in the company. They have to sell their vision to investors to bring in funding. They have to sell that vision to the marketing team to ensure that the right kind of portrayal is out there in the market. So when you talk about selling, in my opinion, selling happens across the board when you're building the organization. Some for your own benefit of bringing in the people, some for the benefit of the customer. But Kanchi, to your point, my belief is that there's no better than a founder selling it day one onwards, because the way they would understand the needs of the customer, the changes they need to bring to the product or the services, no one else can bring that.
Sure, thanks. I remember you also mentioned about, the concept of marketing. And does that play a role, do you think, at the early stages of a venture? Or
I think if you look at marketing, the best form of marketing that can initially come to any organization is through the customers. And if you are able to deliver the right product with the right service, with the right commitment to the customer, and ensure that you stick by their problems and resolve their problems to give them business benefit, eventually the first set of 3 to 5 customers are the most critical set of customers in any organization. And the initial set of marketing has to happen from there. Now, at the same time, when you look at the customer psyche, and this is extremely important to understand, especially for the young entrepreneurs who have just started or about to start and who are in that journey of 0 to 1, is that as we are starting the company and we go to an enterprise, a large enterprise, right? Imagine the risk that they are taking with you. You are putting your heart and soul to ensuring that you will deliver the product in the right way, but they are also taking equal amount of risk if anything goes wrong. And if you are not delivering what they want, then they are also putting in a lot of effort to ensure that they are successful. And we need to identify with those problems. So what they would look at is how sustainable the organization is, who are backing this organization, who are the initial set of angels in that organization, what kind of product differentiation do you bring, what kind of commitment do you have from the founders and not from anyone else in the organization. And those are very important aspects. So in my opinion, when you look at the marketing, some of these elements and very limited marketing, and these days social media is prevalent, so you can use Facebook and Twitter, more importantly LinkedIn, to really put up your name, and you can do it yourself without too much of a cost involvement, to give that belief to the large enterprises or the medium enterprises that you are here to stay. There is enough pedigree in the team to execute stuff. And then once you have your initial set of 3 4 customers who can evangelize for you, right, plus you get that revenue to really bump up your marketing practices, that's when I think the actual marketing can take place, which is between 1 to 10, not so much between 0 to 1.
sounds good. Got it. So, Mr. Arun, for any startup, once you have a basic version of your product ready and you want to go out to customers, there's this whole question on how much do I charge them, right? What do I price my product at? So, how do you think should a founder decide the price of their product at the very early stage? And then are there any changes that they need to make over time?
Yeah, thank you. And what Ravi said is spot on. That in fact, one of the things I've learned early on, whether it's as a founder or wherever, it's the enemy of the good is perfection. And that's something that the founders must always remember. Don't be perfect. Keep innovating as you're going down. And Ravi actually led me into this particular thing by saying this the other way around. The large customer or whatever is actually taking a risk with you. So, and that's the basis of pricing to my mind. So, here's something I've learned over the years, and Ravi, you're more than welcome to, dispute this number, but I have a simple rule of 30%. And by what? So if let's say you're planning to reduce the costs of a company's operation or that process or something by 100 units, 100 rupees. So I would say charge 30% of that value that you're creating for the company. It looks, why shouldn't you charge 50%? Why not 70%? But let me give you my reason. And Ravi, we can debate this forever.
I know.
But the reason is very simple, that if you at 30%, it's good enough. And you're actually because the real reason is the other side is actually taking that risk on you. So as long as you're leaving a larger portion for them, it's a win-win for both. And if you're lucky, if you get 30% of that value created, you can always creep it up to 40%, 50% by new features, etc. I'm sure, Ravi, you're an expert at that. How do you charge something for something which is new and you add it up? That's really my simple basis. But you figure out what value. For example, there are companies, there are people like Capillary, for example, who increase the revenue of their customers. So what do you charge? I think they charge 25% of extra sales charge. So that's the kind of magic number, 30, 40. Moment you go 50 plus, you may not add value. That's my particular sense in this one. Does that make sense, Ravi?
It certainly makes sense. I do have certainly few points to share, and I'm sure we can, as you have told, we can keep debating about this. It's a topic which can go on forever. But from my lenses, as I see this, Kanchi, Arun, and the audience here, is that there are 3 or 4 components, right, that one has to look at. The basic building block of any pricing mechanism, as Arun said, is how much value you are delivering to the customer. That value can be 100, that value can be 1,000, that value can be 10, right? But that value has to be determined on how much you're delivering to the customer. Now, the second aspect of that pricing is also from the perspective that when you talk about 0 to 1 of revenue, or you're primarily at a pre-revenue stage, right? In some cases, you may have got some funding. In some cases, you may not have got any funding, which basically means that you cannot run your services at loss. Now, that magic number can be 20%, 30%, 40% of profit, but there has to be some profitability. And that profitability will bring in confidence not only within your team, but also to the investor community, because they will look at favorability. Now, if you have to look at that 40% or 30%, what value you are delivering to the customer is one aspect. Second aspect is what is your input cost, right? And those two has to be in sync. The third element is what your customer is pricing to the enterprise or the enterprises in the market. You have to be competitive as you are entering into this segment. Goes without saying. It cannot be that you have built a premium product, you are at a nascent stage, and you are charging, let's say, 10 to your customer, while a competition is going to the same customer and charging 5. You will never be able to win that account on 2 counts. One, your price is high. Second, you are not a big enough enterprise for that customer to look at you, because they will take that risk. So they will always go with someone else instead of you. Pricing has to match what you are putting in your cost, what value you are giving to your customer. And the third aspect is what your competition is charging. A little late in your stage, I would also top it up with a component of gross margin. We are talking about B2B SaaS enterprise model or B2B medium enterprise model, etc. As you move ahead in the curve and as investors look at you, gross margin becomes a very, very important factor. Now, to start with, it can be in the range of 50, 60%, but eventually, if you want to really be a star in your domain and be one of the top companies, then the magic number lies somewhere between 70 to 80% of gross margin. So those are some of the components that one needs to look at. And then there are multiple smaller variables. Which geography are you selling? Who are your buyers? What is the scale of that buyer? And those variables can be built in. Bigger the scale, lower the cost. You can subside that cost with a lot of server capabilities that you would have built across multiple customers, so the cost can come down. There are multiple variables that you can play with, but the top 3 elements that I would look at would be your value to the customer. A percentage of that should be your charge to the customer, but that should be more than your cost. Now that can be 20%, 30%, and then eventually also look at what your competition is charging.
Yeah, can I add to that, Kanchi?
Yes, please, Mr.
Yeah, so the other element I would add, I've been involved with a large number of B2B businesses, is really the way you price. So when you're charging for a technology, let's say, you say, for example, I've been involved with a company which does energy savings, and it's now been in existence for about 10 years. It's now part of a global company carrier. So in the beginning, when they started off, you say, okay, I will, using IoT and analytics, I'm going to save you energy. So they would charge per installation so much money per month, which is an input cost, but there's no commitment to whether the energy would get saved. So the customer has to have a belief by paying you 100 rupees or $100, they will save energy. So my view is the closer you can become what I'd call outcome-based pricing, eventually, once you have enough experience on the belt. And ideal situation is if you're getting paid only if the outcomes you're promising happen. That's the ideal situation. So by the way, in this company, it's now been in existence 11 years, everything is outcome-based pricing, including a little bit of the CapEx. And if there's no energy saving, there is no payment. It's risky, but you need to get to that. And to me, if you can align your pricing with the outcome that you're promising the customer, that's the most ideal one. Ravi, any thoughts on that?
So outcome-based models are interesting, Arun. We have tried our hand at multiple different customer engagements on outcome-based pricing. But in my opinion, outcome-based pricing can work both ways.
It works both ways, is all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it can really derail the overall engagement that you have, or it can really scale up the engagement that you have. So the best way to sort of, if one needs to look into an outcome-based pricing, is to cover the base for yourself. So if, let's say, 100 is the charge that you're going to put your customer and 70 is your cost, instead of 30% profit on it, probably you have 10% profit on it, and 20% can be on outcome based. But then you have linked upside to it as well. So it cannot then stop at 100. If you deliver more, it can go to 110, 120, 130. But eventually what you're essentially doing is that you're at least covering your base cost, and you're not taking that risk. While to the customer, it's all optics, the way you put it across and the way you deliver that outcome.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. But all I'm saying, it depends on the maturity you reach. You can't risk it in the beginning, but in this particular company, we moved to 100% outcome because we are so sure.
Yeah. And yeah, I completely agree. And Arun, the whole aspect, again, because we're talking about early stage 0 to 1.
Yeah, I'm saying I'm not recommending it for 0 to 1,
yeah.
by the way. But I'm just saying it's part of a journey. When you get to from 1 to 10, 10 to 100, this is really the journey that you should be ready for.
Yes.
Lovely. So I'm just going to pick a question from the Q&A tab before we go into the others. Since we're on this topic and it's a little related to what you're talking about, price, looking at your cost, you're pricing your product, and then you look at value-based pricing, right? So the question is, how do you really put a dollar value to intangible benefits that your product may be creating for users? So any thoughts on that?
Ravi, go for it.
Yeah, sure. We deal with it almost on a daily basis. When you develop an ROI model, which is the return on investments, or in other terms, large enterprises will call it cost benefit analysis. When you do that, there are always quantitative benefits and qualitative benefits attached to it. And this is a practical example that you would see in the field when you go out to sell. You will always be asked to quote or price only on quantitative benefits that you're delivering. No matter whatever qualitative benefits you're delivering, you can harp on it. You can say whatever you want. You can save them, let's say, $100,000 of legal expenses, but that's imaginary, right? The whole aspect would be how much focus you can put on quantitative benefit first. The whole intangible benefits that you can define, which is qualitative in nature, can probably help you bump up the pricing by 5-10%, but not more than that. If your belief is that 50% should be covered by intangible benefits, and if you're talking about B2B SaaS, imagine a scenario in 6 months, if you're not able to prove that, they will turn off the tap. And in a churn situation can be much more miserable than acquiring a customer. So it should rather be focused on quantitative benefits. Maybe you bump up the price by giving some intangible benefits as well, which is qualitative in nature, but it will be very difficult to convince the customer no matter what you say. Because from their lenses, if you look at this, their procurement team, their CFO, they will just go by the Excel maths that you're delivering, and then you will be gauged on that output.
Let me add to that. I told you this company, which is called Eco Energy, it's now part of Carrier Corporation. We used to deliver and say we'll deliver you 10 to 12% energy savings without investing or changing a light, changing LEDs, or changing air conditioning. And we used to say one of the big benefits of this is that you can remotely monitor things, etc., etc. And guess what? Nobody used to believe it. And when the pandemic happened, now everybody is wanting to come because it can remotely monitor stuff. But we didn't want the pandemic coming, but it came, and it actually proved that what we used to talk about is real, because nobody could go to sites anymore, and we could monitor that. And now the amount of new customers coming in just on the basis Now they're not worried about 10%. They want remote monitoring as a service. It's strange, but true.
Yeah, yeah. In our world, Arun, the way we look at it in the contact center domain, uh, we obviously focus on things like reducing agents' call time or enabling agents to finish the entire complaint or query within the single
better quality.
Yeah, better quality, etc. But then end of the day, that also improves customer experience. Now, there are intangible benefits like improvement of customer experience. If there is a way for you to still put some quantitative number to it, for example, if you are able to improve your customer experience, your churn will go down. And if you can assess that churn in some form or factor and then link it to ROI, possible.
Correct.
So there are models, even intangibles can be linked to some quantitative benefits, in my opinion. But then the more deeper you get into your engagements with 3, 4, 5 different kinds of customer, more ideas you can use from one customer to another customer and really build up your models accordingly.
Yep.
Fantastic. So talking about churn for your clients, customers, I mean, your churn also plays a very important role. So getting your first customers surely is important, but then retaining those customers plays a very important role for recurring revenues as well. So Ravi, maybe if you could highlight, what are the steps that one should take so the customer sticks along for a longer duration? Or
in a traditional world, the older world, right? This was a role played by someone called as an account manager or a farmer, right? Whose job was to look into 2 or 3 specific accounts and continue to grow the business. In today's world, it's called customer success, right? And there are different models in which customer success can be applied. Now, when we talk about 0 to 1, that's an area where you cannot invest so much on customer success, but at the same time, you want your customer to be successful, which basically means that the founders are then playing a very, very important role in managing that success of the customer. And I'm talking only 0 to 1. When you get to 1 to 10, customer success models are necessity these days when you talk about B2B SaaS. But from 0 to 1, those are the areas where it becomes very important for the founders and the senior leadership of that organization to play a pivotal role in ensuring that customer issues are dealt with first. Now, the metric that one can look at is that when you're in a B2B SaaS model, when you acquire a customer, right, you expect that customer to grow with revenue for you, right? Now, as it grows, there can be 2 ways it can grow. One, it can consume more of the same product or service that you've delivered, or it can consume additional products and additional services from you that you have, but you have not sold yet to the same customer. That's one metric. So you have to first look at your own portfolio, what you can do. The second is if you sort of create a chart here and look at what kind of customers you have, let's say the first 3 customers, I would plot them in a graph, right? And I'll plot them in a graph across my x-axis. I will say their ability to scale in terms of taking more product capabilities from me. Second, their ability to pay. If their ability to pay is high and their ability to scale is high, and then they are in the top right corner of that quadrant, then for me, they are a gold customer. I would, at any point in time, will ensure that they are thrilled with our services, with our product, because acquiring a customer is extremely tough. Managing that customer is even tougher. But if you are able to do that, then revenue generation from the same customer is probably much easier, right? In a B2B SaaS model, especially in large enterprise, one would typically take about 9 months to 12 months to acquire a customer. So if you are already putting that effort, you would like to ensure that your customer grows at least 3x to 5x in the next 3 years. So if you plot that and then you figure out which quadrant they are placed, you can have different models on how do you want to approach that customer from customer success point of view.
lovely, thanks. Mr. Arun, I know you've invested in a whole host of startups and you work very closely with the founders too. So, in your experience with interacting with so many startups, what are some of the common mistakes that you see founders make with respect to sales and pricing their product, and how do you suggest they avoid that?
Well, while you're talking of mistakes, there are a lot of mistakes. And let me start before I get to sales and pricing. One of the biggest things, which especially today when I see these companies, all of them are only interested in what's my value, what's my value, what's my value. So, but I say, especially when you're going from 0 to 1 and going for seed funding or whatever it is, one of the biggest things that you do is just focus on the assumptions rather than the Excel sheet or the PPT they produce, which is only making Bill Gates rich. Because frankly, those are all funny numbers. So they should just focus on how many customers can I acquire, what do I do for them, what is the value I create, and go for that. So that's really one of the first things that I say that to founders today. They're so hung up on value. And I don't blame them. There's so much money sloshing around also, and they see so many success stories. So that's one of the big things that I say, that at that early stage, don't be too worried about it. What's the value you're getting? Just make sure that you're choosing the right investor, and more so focusing on the right customers. Because especially in the B2B space, you got to qualify the customers you go after, because many of the customers can kill you with just being kind to you or not saying no to you. So you got to really choose your customer. For example, if you work with my industry, which is telecom, we are terrible to deal with startups. We can take 1 year to give you a yes or a no. So just be careful of the kind of customers you choose. In my view, make sure that you qualify them well, so that, as Ravi said, they come in that magic quadrant of being able to scale up and have the ability to pay. So it's a very tough one to say what mistakes, but this is one of the biggest mistakes that people do, is they're just hung up on a particular thing and they'll keep chasing that same problem. At that point, you got to pivot. I mean, I remember when I was involved with starting of InMobi, the first product that we came up called M Coach actually collapsed. We just got it wrong. So you got to pivot. So you got to have. So the biggest thing that you as a founder should have is the ability to know when something's not working, and be able to pivot and try something else out. That in my view is the biggest thing that I look for in founders. That do they have the ability to pivot at that point, or they're just so hung up on one thing and keep going and run out of money. Ravi, any thoughts on that?
Of course, you're bang on there. Even early in our days at Unifor, and I'm talking about 2008, 2009, when not so much mentorship or coach mentors were available, or advisors were available, and nor the funding situation or startup ecosystem in India was so much developed. We had NASSCOM forever, but NASSCOM focusing on startups was probably nascent at that point in time. We did not have ties focusing so much, etc. Right? But now it's a very different sort of world altogether. In my opinion, when you talk about 0 to 1 and talk about funding and what value one can sort of attach to that organization, I think the only comment I will have for startups and the founders here would be that the best form of capital is through invoices. If you are able to ensure that your initial funding is coming through invoices, then funding in this era is not tough. Getting the right mentors is critical. Getting the right customers is critical. And learn to say no. At early stage, if you are focused on 2 or 3 different aspects of your product capabilities and services capabilities, and you know you can maneuver and pivot within that, feel free to do it. But if someone comes to you and says, you are selling sun, but I want moon, don't fall for it.
Exactly.
There are customers who will buy sun from you. Don't worry. You just have to find the right customer, as Arun said. It's very important to say no as well. We at times at Unifor early in our days have said yes to too many things in life. And we had to say no after a point in time because we did not have the capability to deliver what the customers were demanding. And eventually it was a bitter relationship that we had to go through. Either we were investing a lot of time and energies from our end to deliver something that we were not capable of. And the customers were never happy because we never had the capability for what they wanted. And we never got those monies. So it's very important to say no, to identify the right customer. But if you are really hung up on funding without focusing on sale, you are on the wrong path. best form of funding can come through invoices. And early in your life, if you can focus on that, funding is an outcome which will happen.
Yep.
And these days in India is probably much easier compared to what we had seen in 2008, 2009 when we started.
Lovely. Ravi, I know in our conversations also, so we have another session coming up for the 1 to 100 journey, where we're talking about scaling a B2B business. But even during the 0 to 1 journey, I know last week you mentioned that there are organizational changes a founder should make. So can you please elaborate on that a bit?
Certainly, Kanchi. As founders, when we build our organization, right, we tend to give a miss to the whole culture aspect of the organization, right? And it starts very early on how you want to really grow your organization, what kind of culture you want to build. It's very, very important, and one needs to really focus on that. Now, as you are building that culture, right, one of the things, let's say at Unifor, we follow is that for us, no matter what happens, customer comes first. No matter what happens, innovation always happens, right? And we always collaborate internally, externally, be transparent and collaborate. And all the time, while following all that three, do things the right way. Now, those are some of the cultural elements that we started very early on in our lives, even before raising our first round of investment, which happened 6 years later after we started up, right? And the journey always constantly changed for us. 0 to 1, 1 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 50, and it continued, right? But at every juncture of the organization, it is important to understand what kind of teams do you have. If you are getting a leader who has seen a journey between 10 to 100, and you bring that person early on in 0 to 1, it will be an overkill. That person will not find it interesting, and eventually will have to part ways. Now, if you're getting a senior person, you're parting ways, it's a loss of at least a year. 3 months to find that person, 6 months for that person to understand, 3 months for that person to go away, and you find a replacement, minimum a year gone. And at early stage, 0 to 1, you cannot have the luxury of losing a year with someone who's not aligned. At the same time, as you are growing your organization, and let's say you are at 1 to 10 stage, and you are getting a person who has scaled up an organization from 0 to 1, that may not be the right person for you. So as founders, one needs to also understand that you always are looking for your leadership team who has seen that scale at the right time. It's okay. Some people will continue to grow with you who are more entrepreneurial in their nature, who are eager to learn, who are eager to take those risks with you and go forward. Those people will continue to grow with you, and always good to have a core team who continues to grow with you. But then don't shy away in getting additional leaders in the organization. Some will grow internally, some has to come from outside, because neither you have seen that scale nor your initial team members have seen that scale. So if you grow, you need some advisors, but more importantly, you need team members who have seen that scale. Now, once you get to 10 to 100 is another different journey. And people who have scaled up your organization from 1 to 10 may not be the right candidates for scaling up from 10 to 100. So you have to constantly ensure that your teams are put in the right way. And remember, at early stage, one wrong hire brings you back by a year easily in at least one particular segment of your organization. It can be marketing, it can be sales, it can be finance. 0 to 1, and Arun mentioned in one of our conversations earlier, 0 to 1 is not only revenue. 0 to 1 is also an employee. 0 to 1 is the first invoice. 0 to 1 is the first marketing campaign that you are running. 0 to 1 is the first HR software that you're deploying. 0 to 1 can be anything, but one wrong step there can take you backwards. So as founders, one needs to be sort of constantly on top of everything. Just don't leave it to all individuals. And 0 to 1 is a stage where you cannot afford to take that risk.
Fantastic. Thank you. So we'll open it up for questions. I know we should give them ample time to ask questions, and we have about 30 minutes left for the session. So I'm going to request, I know we have quite a few coming in, we'll start taking those, but to the rest of the participants, please feel free to leave your questions using the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. And we'll be, Mr. Arun and Ravi would be delighted to help answer them. I'm going to say that on their behalf. But all right, so the first question is in terms of competitive pricing. So when you're looking at competitive pricing, along with offering common features, how do we set up the price for the unique features being offered? And how is it different for software as a service or IT, for example, versus hardware, which is robotics or automobile companies?
Arun, would you like to take that up? Or
No, I can take a stab at it because I personally like the hardware space. Most people in India don't like the hardware space. So, so that's absolutely the basis of pricing. So you got to figure out where against your competition that you're unique, and clearly you can charge more for anything unique, and it's up to you. Because if you give it away free, I mean, you're giving it away free. So there's got to be a base deliverable, and on top of it, and that's how you'll increase your price. That's my personal view, and I've always done that all my life, working anywhere else. You got to be absolutely clear what is unique about you. And it's true in hardware. I mean, I used to sell PBXs long ago, before most of you were born. And we had some unique features at that time, X25 something. So I had simply priced it saying, I'm just going to give you an option to price it. There was no change in the product. But I said, if you want that, then I'm going to charge you a fee to switch it on. It's all sitting there. You can all give it away, or you don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. In the initial days, one of the most important aspects that you're focusing on is to get your first beachhead customer.
Yeah.
Or maybe the first 3 customers in 3 different verticals. So it's not a bad strategy to not only understand how unique you are compared to the competition, it's also very important to understand with that unique feature, what additional benefit you're giving to the organization. Tell them what benefit you are giving them, but don't charge them. Say that we are giving it to you for free. What we need from you is probably, can you do a joint press release with us?
Yeah.
Can you become a reference at least for the next 3 calls that are arranged for you? It can be with an investor, potential investor, it can be with a potential customer, and we will ensure that it is not your competition. But if I give you for free, can you help me with these 2 or 3 additional things, which would really help me scale up, right? And people, if you are transparent, people will always be out there to help you. So it's very important to understand your unique feature capability, put a value to it, and tell the customer, while there is a value to it, I'm not charging you, but I need these 3 things from you. Yep. I mean, at Unifor, when I came to Singapore, one of our first customers is a large wealth management bank, private banking. And it's a global bank with presence in about 30 different countries, headquarters in France. When we went and we pitched, there was an RFP, we were part of the RFP, then they asked us to do a proof of concept, we did that, we were selected. And they told us in the procurement stage, finally, that your price is X% high than your competitor. Can you do anything about it? Because technologically, you are far superior. I said, fair enough, I want this. It's a big account. If I bring this down, can you help me with A, B, and C? It was a press release, reference calls with our investors, 3 industry connects, etc. And they did it.
Yeah.
For them, it was of pretty easy task, and they did it for us. So it's up to you what you ask, what are your critical elements. Giving for free for the first 3-4 customers is not a bad choice. And once you also understand how much value you have delivered to the customer while you gave it for free, to your 4th customer, you know exactly what you're going to charge.
Exactly.
Because you know what kind of value you are delivering out of that.
Fantastic. All right. The next question is more on how do we approach new markets. So as an Indian company looking at expanding to international markets, whether it's America, Europe, how do you go about getting your first customer? How do you get over objections of lack of experience in that market or lack of customers, etc.?
I'll take a stab at it, and Ravi, you please add to that. But I'm assuming that you're a company based in India. So, and
Yeah.
this is really where I think at both IA and TIE, NASSCOM, we made a difference to the platform, to all these companies, because I mean, again, this is no disrespect to service companies, but the fact is the biggest models we had till now were Infosys, Tech Mahindra, TCS, who were all service-led companies, not products. And one of the problems that used to be is that a lot of these global product companies are sit in the magic quadrant of Gartner and Forrester. So, so I think one of the jobs that we managed to do well is convince our big companies, whether it's an Airtel, whether it's our banks, our retailers, to build small innovation groups to try out these new companies, because you got to try it in your home market. Chances are very little that if you've not done it in your home market, that you'll succeed in just straight going to the US. And Ravi, you can argue with me on this one, but I'm assuming you made from here and want to go to Singapore or you want to go to US. So you got to, again, your investors, especially if you've chosen your investors well, are likely to give you connects into those companies. And the good part of India, frankly, is, and if you guys are not aware, but at NASSCOM, I know this is an IAN event, but I'm still putting on my NASSCOM hat. We do have a whole grouping, 700, 800 large multinationals have what we call the global in-house centers here. May not be selling a damn thing here, but their entire technology, let me tell you, gets developed. The CTO may not be sitting here, but certainly the deputy CTO and people who are doing the work are all sitting here. So by all means, use NASSCOM, go to these companies, and every single large retailer, bank, everybody has a backend here. They're right here, but you don't know about it. So by all means, go use it, is my point to you, because you'll have technology people and they will look, because they're the guys who are recommending for the world. I mean, take Target, take these ones that these guys also, the innovation center are now running here. I mean, this is really developed into a fine art. Walmart, Target, Tesco, all have innovation centers. And for the world, they're scouting for, so go there. You don't necessarily have to go there first. Yeah. Ravi, anything?
No, absolutely. Even for us, after we pivoted with our first round of funding, 2014-15, for the first 2 years, we sold in India, we tested the scale in India, we ensured that the product capabilities are fine-tuned, the customers are getting the value, is when we sort of expanded beyond India. Now, there are two or three critical components when you go and scale up beyond India, right? One, it's not cheap to go and expand outside India. So you need to have some backup with your funding, or you should have enough revenue in place to support operationally your expansion outside India. Number two, when you look at the initial sort of connects or initial Rolodex as you go outside India, I being a co-founder, when I came to Singapore, I was alone. I was running a startup within a startup, right? And day one, I started doing cold calls, LinkedIn. And the first customer that I landed was the first meeting that I had the second day in Singapore. But beyond that, as Arun mentioned, there are a great set of forums in India right now, be it NASSCOM, IN, TIE, etc. And then the investors would certainly have a lot of connects beyond India. The third aspect also is to understand which market outside India you are going to target. And I'll tell you, there are enough pros and cons in each of these markets, but you need to be ready. For example, if you are selling your product in India or Asian market, and I'll not talk about Japan and Australia, but let's say Southeast Asia, closer home, or even in Middle East, right? Let's say you promised 100 and delivered 90. It's still okay. You can manage it. Customers would understand, you can give something else and they'll be fine. Go to Australia, go to Japan, go to US, or go to Europe. You put in an agreement, you'll deliver 100. You cannot deliver 99. You have to deliver 100. And if you have to do that, then you have to be absolutely ready from your product perspective. Of course, the benefit is that you will also get premium payments in terms of your cost to revenue ratio would be fairly high. But then entering into that market is extremely costly as well. So you need to have enough funding in place. And there are different instruments to raise that funding to ensure that you are in the right market. But yeah, investors, advisors, cold calling. I mean, I don't know why, but these days I find out that people are not sort of getting into LinkedIn or cold calling. But trust me, as a founder, you need to learn the trick of picking up a phone call and really sort of enticing a customer on how to get that deed in place. The moment you do it, you know how to train your team as well. Because at the end of the day, you will run out of references, even with your investors or advisors. There are plethora of companies globally. You need to make a mechanism and work which would be run by your inside sales team, your sales development reps, etc. But if you don't know how to generate your own lead being a founder, then no one else can do it for you because they will not get the right training in place.
Lovely. Thank you. The next two questions are more from a pricing perspective. So I'll take the first one, which is on how do you define the quantitative benefits on day one? So when you don't have enough data to assess, right? Because you've not deployed your product. So how do you go and calculate what the quantitative benefits are? Is it just based on instinct that you go with, or how do you assess that?
Proof of concepts, fabulous way to assess what kind of benefit you can generate. Let's say you want to land in a big opportunity, hypothetically, let's say $1 million, right? Do a proof of concept for $100,000. Look at what kind of benefits you are generating, and then price the next 900 accordingly. That can be one way of figuring out what can be the right optimal pricing and what kind of benefits. The second is you already have competition out in the market. There are multiple ways to figure out what your competition is charging, right? And if that competition is large enough, then their cost also would be higher than you. So you can always charge lesser than a competition and give some additional benefits to the enterprise where they will choose you over the competition. So there can be multiple different ways. And then finally, how do you assess the quantitative benefits? When you define the product, you know what kind of value you are going to attack and generate for the customer. With that belief, you go and build your product and roadmap. For example, when we developed our first version of our speech analytics product, we knew that with this kind of steps, we will be able to bring down the average call time by about on an average 10%. Now, if my call cost is 10 rupees, and if deployment with my product, it can come down to 9 rupees. I know one rupee of value per call I'm generating for my customer, which means for every call that I process, I can possibly charge about 30 cents on the metric that Arun said.
Yeah, I like your 30%. It's yours now.
So let's say it's 30%, and then you charge 30 cents. Do a quick check what your competition is charging. If it is in the ballpark, similar range, you are good there. Yeah. Then it's up to you to deliver that value, which can only happen once you deploy it. And proof of concepts can be a good way to start with.
No, the point which Ravi is making is correct, that if you cannot define the exact value, not exact value, but what is the value either in the cost side or on the revenue side, it can't be a third place. Or it can be a third place is quality. And the quality you need to quantify. So you got to be able to define. That's why you're building the product. If you're not clear, don't build the product, is my point to you. It's as simple as that, because you'll never be able to charge for it.
From a longer term, in terms of creating a business model, a founder is asking a question. Let's say you're looking at a B2B SaaS startup. Is it right to go with the freemium model where you're giving them the service for free for the first 3 to 4 months, and then go ahead and charge them on an annual basis, or would you all advise against that?
My personal view is that it depends on your level of funding. If you can give it away free for 3 months to get a user base, to get the experience, by all means, but don't run out of money.
Yeah. I was about to say that. Don't take a risk of killing yourself and then figuring out that customer is not there anymore. It would be a catastrophe. If you are giving it for free, put your heart and soul into it, but then ensure that after 3 months you're successful. And then you can charge money. So be upfront to the customer. The benefit that probably a startup at 0 to 1 level can have, and that's a plan that you can continue to play even between 1 to 10, is that when a customer asks you, what if you don't deliver me value, right? Uh, or can you reduce the price if you don't deliver me value, etc. Or what kind of commitment? So they can come back and say, your competition is giving me this, your competition is giving me that, etc. What are you bringing to the table? And this will happen, in my opinion, probably in every discussion that you will have with your customer. The plan that you can always play is that we are a B2B SaaS organization. So we also know that even to get this signed, we have spent about 6 to 9 months into this relationship already. We have put enough resources in place. More than you, more than us being important to you, you are more important to us. And we know that if we are not delivering you the right value, you will stop the tap. And if you stop the tap, it's not a loss to you, it's a loss to us. It may be a minor loss to you, but it's a bigger loss to us. So always play that plan saying that our skin in the game is probably much more than your skin in the game. And we would ensure that you get the right value. What we demand is cover our incidentals, cover our costs. We are not charging you profits at this point in time. For the first 3 months, we don't expect to make monies out of it. But to be transparent, as a company which really intends to grow, we also cannot run it for free forever. So after 3 months, if you see the value, we are able to give you the right kind of product and services. We would expect the price to increase by this much. And for the first 3 customers, that's absolutely fine to do. Again, in lieu of that, ask for press release, ask for reference videos, ask for some quotations, bylines, quote, ask them to quote on social media. There are now plethora of channels available. 2008, 2009, had you asked me, the only option was newspaper. Now you look at it, you have LinkedIn, and one LinkedIn blast can do you wonders.
Just to add to what Ravi said, one of the mistakes that do come out in the B2B space is that you say, okay, I'll give it to you for 3 months, but you don't spend time enough even in drawing up a contract, the ideal contract to say, if I meet these parameters, the order is mine. Yeah. Otherwise, you start getting to another negotiation. So spend more time in the beginning to say, if I meet, and customer will try to not define, but you have to kind of say, look, if I give it to free, I mean, if I meet this parameter, these 2-3 things, then automatically it converts into this. That's the ideal one to my mind. Otherwise, you end up with wasting more time.
Excellent point, Arun. Excellent point. I think this probably is the best point of the night tonight. I have seen this play multiple times. And in the initial days at Unifor, we used to sign a small POC contract. 3 months, you delivered value. Customer says, our business is in a crappy zone right now. Sorry, we cannot invest anymore. But your product was fabulous. We got some results. Let's look back after this after 6 months. Time kills all deals. Trust me. If you are delaying that, that deal will never happen again. So best is to sign one single contract. Yep. You are always investing all your monies and energies into it, all your resources into it. Might as well sign one with a gate for them to exit out.
Yeah.
And if you are successful, they see enough value, they will not exit out. And those 3 months will be very crucial for you to build that relationship. Those 100 days will make or break. Even if you are delivering 90 and not 100, your relationship can take you through.
Exactly. This is all I tell the founders I work with. Well, I used to do this when working for large companies. I would insist that you got to fix this.
Have enough lunches and dinners. I must tell you, I miss those days during COVID. Enough of videos. The whole fun of having a lunch with your customer or dinner with your customer and learning through those experiences is invaluable.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So I think one of the founders did ask that question, and it does answer that.
No, most people do forget this piece about
printed contract.
When you give it free, the contracting is equally important.
Yeah, absolutely. The next question is more from once you've got a customer on board and signed, what are the suggestions that, pointers that you would give them in terms of onboarding and training their clients? Are there any things that they need to be careful of during that process? Or how do they do it right?
It depends on product to product, which organization is delivering what kind of product. There can be products where the customer can themselves run it. There can be products where no matter what happens, you will have to run it. Then there can be products where you run it for, let's say, 6 to 9 months, and then you hand it over to customer, right? It depends on how mature your product is and how mature the customer is to execute it themselves. Now, invariably, what really works, and I've seen it work well or not work well, if your product is sold and customer is not consuming it,
Yeah.
while they're paying for it. You know, it happens a lot of times, especially in large enterprises, when a large enterprise is making out payments every month of hundreds of thousands of crores, that 2 lakhs, 3 lakhs per month will not even show in the rounding error. So for the first 3-6 months, it will go unnoticed. Then someone will someday figure out why I'm paying this. What is the value being generated? And if you at that point in time figure out that no one is consuming your product, it's catastrophic. People will switch off the tap. So one of the most important aspects there is that day one, if your product is mature enough, create a training kit, train your customer on how to use the product. Ensure that for the first 2 months or 3 months, you get on a weekly cadence with the customer. Look at how are they consuming the product. If you are deploying this on cloud, or if there is a way or mechanism to pull out the logs and figure out how are they accessing or consuming the product, use those metrics and go back to the customer. And more importantly, your champion or the sponsor in that account to tell them you are doing great, you are using the product in the right way. These are 3 more values we can deliver to you. Are you interested? Or if they're not using it, then go back to the sponsor. Even before they figure out, you should figure out that they're not using it and tell your sponsor, you are paying for it. You are not getting the value out of it by not using the product. Our suggestion is to do X, Y, Z. It's very important to constantly look into those metrics and always have that connect with the sponsor. At the end of the day, the sponsor will come back to you and say if the product is useful or not.
No, spot on, Ravi, because sometimes the guy who's buying you is not the user.
Yes.
And especially in a SaaS product, for example, if let's say somebody's bought a SaaS HR platform, but it's got to be used by everybody. But are they using the leave? And this is where what word which you used is customer success team comes.
Yes.
That's the job of the customer success, to make sure that you, especially in SaaS, where you're being charged per module, per month, per employee. For example, you just got to make sure that enough people find users. You discover why somebody's not using it. Go talk to them. Maybe they're not trained. Maybe your UI sucks. I mean, it could be anything. You got to go fix it.
Yeah.
And then make sure that the consumption happens, because without that, you will get turned off. I mean, I remember, this is not really on SaaS. I'm talking of 15, 20 years ago when I was running BT. I used to run a procurement cell in India, about 30, 40 people, which would help the UK procurement team. So one of the projects I suggested was, because BT was one of the largest buyers of licenses at that time. That time there was no SaaS. Of everything, we had large licenses. So I said, let me do a project to understand what is the actual utilization of those licenses. I was told by the senior guys, do not dare to do it. So many people would have lost their jobs in the process. So it works the other way around.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, one of the things that comes to my mind is when we're delivering a product, we talked about training and talked about consumption. There is no deployment that is smooth, right? No matter how easy or how cumbersome your product is, there will always be some challenge, either at the start or 2 months into running, 3 months into running, there will be some bugs. I would suggest, and I would recommend to all the founders or otherwise in this call who are listening to this, is that when you identify a problem, be transparent and go to the customer even before the customer comes to you, saying that we have identified this, don't worry, we are on top of it, we will solve it for you. And if the customer has found it, don't shy away from it. Don't disconnect the calls. Don't meet the don't do of or don't be in a situation where you not meet the customer. Customers always appreciate if you take the problem head on and be in front of them and tell them, it's our mistake. We understand the problem. We may not have the immediate solution, but we are finding a solution for you. Whatever it takes, we are here and we'll solve this problem for you. It's always important to play that card. That gives enough comfort to the customer. They know that you are in with them, thick or thin. You will ensure that they are successful. It's a very important sort of trait, and not everyone has it. I remember one of the instances we were delivering to one of the largest conglomerates in South India who are into this multi-business, who are in multiple businesses. And there was a small bug in an application that we delivered, which created issues in the ETL layer. And because of that, multiple applications that they were running, they were not able to update data in the backend systems. And because of that, there were a lot of financial transactions that has happened on the field, but there was no trace available in the backend system. So no one knew where those monies are and how to trace that back. And I got a call. It was Diwali. It was my birthday. I was in my hometown. I got a call stating that this, and the CEO directly called me and said, what is happening? I want you right here. This was a call 8 a.m. in the morning. I took a 11 a.m. flight, Diwali and birthday together. I reached Chennai about 2 o'clock, in office at 4 o'clock, their office at 5 o'clock, sat with the customer, looked at all the issues, called 3 or 4 of my team members who were really focusing on engineering. And it took us about 4 days, non-stop work, 96 hours, non-stop work, sitting in client premises and executing it and solving the problem. That customer continues to be our customer 7 years on. It has not left us. So it's important for us to ensure that you are by the customer all the time, and customer first. People say it, but it's very important and hard to follow. But if you do that right, they'll be there for ages with you.
Yep.
Brilliant. I think it's things like this that get a customer to stick along with you, and it's this mindset that you have to create, and you have to believe in it. For it to be in your blood to drive, that makes you drive up to there or fly up to there and cater to the needs. I mean, it's this whole culture that you build in your organization that eventually sees this.
Can I just add to that, Kanchi, if I have a minute?
Yes, please, Mr. Arun.
So right now we're assuming things like that. One of the issues that I've seen in a lot of products out of India, especially the old hardware, I've been involved from C-Dot days and all these ones. One of the failures that most companies have had here, which I must say, is that we just assume the product will work right, but we never put in that much effort. What happens when it goes wrong? We never focus that much. Maybe it's happening now, and Umesh should know, but majority of the things I've seen, especially in the hardware space, which somebody did ask, we just assume it works right. And we just never build in all the options and so on and so forth, especially in my business of telecom, to ensure that all the processes are in place when something goes wrong.
Yeah.
Lovely. All right. We have 4 more minutes for the session, so we can take another question or two. Mr. Arun, I know you mentioned you're passionate about the hardware space. So the question is on how do you build a sales channel for hardware robotics companies?
It all depends on what you're doing this for. I mean, if this is you're selling hardware to a warehouse, or you're selling education robots to the consumers' kids. It all depends on that.
Correct.
So it's a very hard one, because if you're building it, let's say for a warehouse or somewhere or the manufacturer, because that's where the robots will get used by and large.
Sure.
You have to go and and it's a direct sale as of now. I don't think, especially in India, those channels are well developed. You have to go. For example, I know I used to be on the board of Domino's, and lots of companies used to come and selling, warehouse automation, for example. So you go to. It's again a direct sale, but there are companies I know who are building education robots. So these days, I know with lockdown, there are companies like iRobot and Milagro who are selling robot for cleaning homes. That's a different channel. It's a consumer channel. So you got to, depending on the kind of product and robots that you're using, you got to, and there are, for example, I know Milagro, iRobot, and online is the best channel today. And today the pandemic has, I mean, even for people who would never use an online, everybody is now surviving on online. So it's really wonderful to be able to sell. For business, it's like Ravi said, you can use LinkedIn and so on and so forth. Otherwise, you use Google, Facebook, and reach consumers online, or Instagram today. I mean, I'm not on any of these. I'm on LinkedIn, but I'm not on Facebook or Instagram. So I don't know. I genuinely don't know about it.
And in terms of, say, the billing time period for B2B SaaS companies, the question is what would be the suggested time period? Do you charge on a monthly basis, quarterly, or annually? So
Ravi?
how does one identify that?
So if you can push for it while you are on a SaaS model, nothing like an advanced annual billing. Nothing like that. It's the best form of billing. If you can do annual advance and the customer is willing to pay, go for it. Transparently speaking, in India, it's extremely tough. Depending on what kind of check size you are focusing on, it's extremely tough. You can possibly try half yearly advance, quarterly advance, but anything lesser than that, I would not recommend. Don't go for monthly advance. It's a pain in the process. Every month you will have someone chase the customer, and pulling that monies out will not be easy. Worst case scenario, go for a quarterly advance. Best case scenario, if you can pull out annual advance, nothing like it.
I agree.
But do focus on signing at least a 3-year contract.
Okay, fantastic. I think we're running out of time. We have about 30 seconds left in this session. So I will conclude it here. But, to the founders who are on the call, we do have an entire series lined up, as you may know. So we can surely help get those questions answered through other sessions. So thank you, Mr. Arun and Ravi, so much for an incredible session. I'm sure the founders have benefited a lot. It will really help them as they go ahead and implement the suggestions that you've given through this session. So thanks once again for your time today. Truly appreciate it. For our founders that are on the call, our next session is on B2C pricing, sales, and the go-to-market strategy for that. I am going to paste the registration link in the chat box right now, so please feel free to click on that and register for the next session. And we will also be posting it on our social media pages as well, so you could register via the link there as well. So I hope you've received it. It's on the chat now. And if you do have any questions, or you're looking to connect with any of the speakers, or looking to raise capital, just feel free to write to me, and I'll be happy to connect you or get those questions answered. I'm going to leave my email ID again in the chat box. It's kanchi@indianangelnetwork.com. I hope you'll have received that as well. And yeah, that brings us to the close of this session.